All right, everyone. Welcome to the A plus session. Um, we're going to go over the objectives and just some quick notes and things about the exam because we are in transition. So it's important that everybody understands the options that you have when it comes to these exams. But before we get started, we have a couple students that recently passed their 901 and their 902. So I want to give them a chance to give their summaries and any updates or any Easter eggs that they want. So I guess Brian, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Kelly. Are you there, Brian? Mic not working? Okay. No worries. Let me get that situated. Um, oh, okay, I got you. No worries. Um, well, you can type in whatever you want, and I can, everyone can read. What about you, Kelly? Do you have any? Do you want to give a summary or give a brief? Uh,
Yeah, not a lot to tell. You study all the different things and do lots of practice tests, but the wording is just so different on the actual exams. So you
mm-hmm.
just have to remember to slow down and read every word on not just on the question, but also on the answers. So there were a lot of them. It was like 2 of them were right answers. You had to choose the best of the right answers.
Mm-hmm.
I think I had 3 or 4 of the simulations, and they put those right at the beginning. So what I ended up doing was skipping those and doing the rest of it and then coming back to those so that I didn't feel stressed.
Perfect.
And then use that flag them and go back if you need to. Most of them I didn't change. There were 1 or 2 that I was like, oh yeah, and changed them. But yeah, it's nice to have it done and not have that pressure of that deadline.
Yeah, definitely. I hear you there. That's a great summary. Was there anything on the exam that you feel that you weren't prepared for? Maybe you didn't see it enough of it, or anything like that in the resources that you used?
I don't think so. I think pretty much everything was covered. It was just trying to figure out, what they were asking. Was the hard part.
Gotcha.
I just wish there was a way to study those types of questions. The way because they put just so much information in there. It's like they have to paint the scene for you before you get to the point.
Right, I agree. It's really hard to questions that you see on the exam. Even it doesn't matter how many different practice exams you take. You have Cert Master, you have Exam Compass, you have Pocket Prep. There's a ton of them, but none of them really simulate what you actually see on the exams. No matter how much studying you do or how many practice exams you take, doesn't really prepare you for it. You get there and
you don't cross every I, every T and dot every I. That's paper out that quiz you.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought someone was responding. Yeah, so that's all good advice when it comes to A plus, or actually any of them. Actually, take your time, read the question, because like she says, there's a lot of information. So if you haven't taken it yet, kind of prepare yourself for that. You have to look for the key words. There's always going to be something that gives away what you're looking for. So you're going to make sure that you look for that. And what I love, what she did was, instead of taking time and trying to figure out those performance-based questions at the beginning, you just skip them, right? Just skip them and gain your momentum in the multiple choice section and the scenarios. And then that way, once you're done with those, you can go back to the performance-based questions And you know, you don't have to worry about how much time you're spending on them. You know, you don't have to worry about sacrificing the rest of the exam at the expense of trying to figure those out. So that's a really good strategy. I recommend everyone do that. Okay. So real quick, she was able to get the 900 series knocked out before it expired, so she's good, right? She's A+ certified. It doesn't come with a series number attached to your certification, right? You're A+ certified, you're good. But very important for those of you that have passed the 901, and if you've already passed it, then you're locked in. You have to make sure that you get the second one before it expires, or you're going to have to restart. So my advice would be, if you haven't taken the 901 yet, or if you haven't passed it, I'm sorry. If you haven't passed it yet, what I would do is on my retake, I would go in for the 1001. Okay, that way, it doesn't matter, right? You know, you don't have to worry about a clock at the end of July that's going to make you start over. So you're not locked in as long as you don't already have one cert. But if you do, just make sure you understand that your cert, your exam pass, not your cert, it expires with the exam. So you have to make sure you get them both. She was able to do that, so she's good, right? If there's anyone that doesn't understand that, then just get with me and I'll walk you through it. But, okay. So number one, you know, the objectives are, you know, always going to be the first thing that you visit. It's going to tell you everything that's mapped out. And the good thing about these objectives compared to the 900 series is they're very similar. The main difference is this right here. It's been added. Okay. So there's a transition document that was created by Jason, and it maps out the differences between what you see in the 900 series and what you need to know for the 1000 series. Okay, so you want to make sure you refer to that when you're in preparation. Okay, if you're transitioning from the 900 to the 1000. All right, it walks you through, and you'll also get a book. And let me show you what that book looks like. This one right here. Okay, I have a digital version of it. So you guys should be getting the physical copies. I'm pretty sure sent to you, and this is where you're going to be, you know, researching that additional information. Okay, so just make sure you use this in tandem with the training to tighten up any areas. Okay, like I said, for the most part, these objectives are identical when you put them next to the 901. So you know, a lot of this stuff, it just carries over. You just got to look out for what's new. Okay. So we've talked about the objectives. Is there any areas in particular that anyone wants to address when it comes to the first A+ exam or the second one? It doesn't really matter. Sending out the people that pass. Dan says they're sending automatically or cutting out the people that pass the 9. Can you clarify what are you saying, Dan? What are you asking? Are they sending that book to us? No. So the book is going to be to supplement the people that are trying to pass the first exam. If you've already passed it, if you've already passed the 901, then your main focus should be knocking out the 902 as soon as possible. Because the other thing that you have to take into account is after your second attempt, after your first attempt, you can go in literally the next day. If you just say that you're taking the 902 for the first time and you fail it, you can literally go in the next day if you schedule it again and take it again. But once you fail that second attempt, you're gonna be on a 14-day clock. So that's half a month right there, right? So, okay, Dan's saying you set an appointment to take it on June. Okay, June 26th. Okay, yeah, that's great. Because that gives you time to go back in case you have any missteps. What you don't want to do is just make sure you don't put yourself in a position to where you run out of time. Give yourself at least 14, 15 days. So if you do end up failing the first time or the second time, you still have time to go back in, because the main thing is just getting through. If you already have the first one, the main thing right now is getting through the second one so that you don't have to start over. Okay, that would be a pain. No one wants to do that. So, and that's why I say, if you haven't passed the 901 yet, why put yourself in that situation when those objectives are so similar? All you really need to do is just incorporate this with what you're learning in the 901. And and you should be fine. So if you haven't passed the 901 yet, I would be scheduling my exam for the 1001. That's just me. Okay. So at the very least, you don't have to worry about the clock. So all right. So I'm not sure how many of us are working on A+ currently, but I do want to answer whatever questions you guys have. So Brian's saying a similar plan is to take the 902 at the end of June. If I fail, you can take a week or so later. Yeah, exactly. That's the point I'm just trying to get across. Make sure that you schedule your first and even your second one with time to take another one if something happens. All right. If you're looking at like the middle of July, towards the end of July, you're putting yourself in a real cruncher. If you miss the second one, you're not going to have time to take it for a third time. So if you're working on 902 now, I'm just trying to make sure that it's clear. You're trying to beat the clock right now. So, all right. Okay. So with that said, someone did just pass the 901, right? So I think 902 would be a good place to focus for the day, since that's an exam that's kind of in the red zone.
If it's not too late, sorry, if it's not too late, I do have a question just on general 901. Sure. So, on the objectives for the review, it says, the core one objectives, pretty much all of them say given a scenario, configure, given a scenario, yada, yada, yada. So does that mean that, the test itself, it's all on a computer, right? So it's like, would they be wording it out as far as, how would I set up a router, and then you do it, or do you actually have to physically set up a router?
No, you're not going to physically set up a router. So the questions are going to be presented in scenario form, right? It's not going to be something that's cut and dry. You're going to be, you're going to be a junior administrator, and they're going to bring you into a situation where a customer brings you a PC and they complain that it keeps shutting off. What's the most likely cause, right? Those type of things are what they're getting at when they say scenario, given the scenario. Okay. Now, something that's very important to understand is when you go through these objectives, and right now I'm just going through the 1001. I know you're talking about the 901, but
I'm sorry. I'm on 1001. My mistake. I'm sorry.
Okay, great. That's even better. So what's important to understand when you're going through these objectives is the information is here, but this is what you need to know about it. So this tells you if you need to spend some time doing something, or if you just need to know the difference between something, right? So given a scenario, install and configure. When you see install and configure, that means that you want to get some practice. You want to get some hands-on practice doing this stuff, because they expect you to understand the ins and the outs of it. Not just from a basic level, but part of this is hardware troubleshooting.
Right.
So, it's noticing when there's a problem, and, what are the signs, and, how do you fix this, that type of stuff. So that requires more than just listening to videos sometimes. Sure. So anytime you that's when you want to make sure that you do something to supplement whatever training you're going through, right? Same thing here as saying install components, right? You want to get some practice of doing that.
So in your opinion,
right,
is you certify enough? Because, I really don't have access to physical components or things or a whole lot of software outside of what is provided through the program. So would you think that if I did the U-Certify and did fine on it and all these things, that should be enough? Or would you say even still to try to find something else?
It's the next best thing, because, at least at the very least, you have visual components, right?
Mm-hmm.
On U-Certify, there's a tower and there's a motherboard, and you have to place the processor in the slot, and you have to put the RAM where it goes, right? So it's better than nothing. But in my opinion, there's nothing better than the real thing. If there's a computer that you can get your hands on that you're not worried about breaking, and I would definitely recommend that. That's what I did when I went through the program. I just used an old computer I had laying around, and that's how I really started to understand the stuff when I put my hands on it. But I'm a hands-on learner, so that's why that worked for me.
Okay.
But even U-Certify, it's the next best thing, because if you can't get your hands on something, at the very least, you can visually do it on the PC, and it's just like doing it. You just don't feel the weight, right? You don't hear it, you don't and all that stuff. But you know what it looks like where it goes, so that's really what matters.
Okay, appreciate that.
No problem at all. Okay. And in contrast to these, given the scenarios up here, you'll see stuff like this too, where it says compare and contrast. And here it's just about knowing the difference, right? And being able to identify stuff. So always use the objectives to guide how you're studying and how you're preparing for each section, right? It's not just a general way to learn this stuff. It tells you, what stuff you need to know how to do and what stuff you need to know the difference between, and what you need to know how to identify, all that stuff, okay? But mostly this is what you're going to see, given a scenario. So be used to those. You're going to see quite a few on the exam. All right.
Okay.
See what else we got here. Command's heavy on the 902. Line Third Master. You talking about command line? Yeah, you're gonna want to make sure that you know those. Okay, and like I said before, the objectives are going to tell you exactly what you need to know and how much of it you need to know, right? It starts right here with the percentages. So the second exam, being the 902, you can see the main focus here is going to be operating systems, Windows operating systems in particular, right? 30%. And then your software troubleshooting comes in right behind that. So that involves command line stuff, right? So you definitely want to make sure that you know those. For the most part, make sure you know what they're used for. If you know what they're used for and what problems they fix, why would I run a check disk, or why would I run a SFC, right? System finder, right? Why am I running defrag, right? There's a why behind each of those, and if you make sure you know the whys, then you should be fine, even with all the blah 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 and how they present the questions, the terminology. At the end of the day, they're trying to get to something, and if you can find the question and just figure out what it is, that they're getting at, you should be good as long as you know your stuff and you do your homework. All right. Some stuff is not easy to tell the difference between, so you have to get used to that, because they do put a lot of things on the exam that are similar. Example, like if we're talking about protocols, right, like Telnet and Secure Shell, they do exactly the same thing. There's a minor difference, or it's not a minor difference, it's a major difference between them. But at first glance, they do the exact same thing. So you have to make sure that you understand the differences between a lot of the similar technologies, because that'll throw you off. And that'll be the difference between you knowing the answer or having to guess between 2 or 3. So, and command line is included in that. So it's good that you're seeing a lot of it in CertMaster. Let's see. With a heavy, You know, yeah, but for the most part, this is where my focus would be on operating systems. I would start here because, you know, this is what the majority of the exam is covering, right? And then this tells you right here what you need to know, right? It tells you everything. So you need to know the difference between the features and upgrade paths, and right? And so the main difference, okay, between the 902 and the 1002 is this is gone, okay? So, and then also Windows operating systems is not as it's not so much an emphasis on Windows. You know, I think they brought the percentages down a bit. Okay. But then your other operating systems like Linux, okay, the stuff that you need to know about Linux is minimal. A lot of people, they get freaked out by that. But I'll tell you this, for the 902, for the second part of this exam, the thing that you want to do is you want to install some virtual machines. Okay, you have access to them in uCertify. You have access to Windows 8, Windows 7, I believe. Okay, they're full versions, and what you really need to do is just kind of get used to the features and the differences between them. But when it comes to the other operating systems, like Linux, okay, this is what they're worried about for this exam. So if you understand what these are, right, you'll be fine. They're not going to go too deep into Linux, right, or the Mac OS. Okay, if you see any questions on the exam, it'll be just a few, right? It's not going to be anything that should drive you crazy, because we're talking about 12%, right? So the main focus is going to be here and here. Now, one thing I want you to take note of is here you're getting your introduction to security, right? And this is why it's good to kind of take these exams progressively instead of trying to skip ahead. If you're just starting off in the field, if you already have the knowledge, then that's fine. But if you're just getting started, it's better to take these exams progressively, because you see shadows of what you're going to see later, right? If you have A+, Net+, Security+, well, you're getting your introduction here, right? The basics of it. And then by the time you get to security, you'll already have that foundation at the very least. Now, there's a ton of other stuff that you're going to be picking up in security. But at the very least, if you have the foundation, then you won't be starting from scratch. And it does the same thing, right? This is the second exam. And if you go look at, what is it? And here we go. Right? So here's the first exam, and you can see here you get your introduction to networking. So it makes sense. Take these progressively, because you're learning stuff progressively and kind of taking in all at once as you move forward. So, and they all tie into each other. All right, once you get to security, you know, it all ties into each other. So it makes sense that they do it like that. Any particular questions about the 902 that anyone has? So John says uCertify has been helpful. Okay. Yeah, you know, the strength of uCertify is the virtual machines, really, when it comes to the second exam, because you know, you don't have to physically go out and get the ISOs or download them, right? You can just use the versions that they have. So I think that's really the strength there. And it gives you virtual versions of equipment and stuff that you may not have, and it puts you through tests. So it's a good resource if you don't have the equipment. But like I said, I recommend getting your hands on the real thing if you can, because there's no substitute for that. Command line, Windows command to fix something during boot. Okay. Yeah, so you know, there's a ton of resources when it comes to getting this stuff. I mean, obviously, you go through here and it tells you everything that you need to know. We have the objectives here. By the way, this is a student forum. And then you just have a ton of stuff here, okay? So as the time goes, I'm gonna be phasing out this 901 stuff. I'm just leaving it here. I know there's people that are but I'm gonna be phasing stuff out, and we're gonna be going strictly to 901. Okay.
Tristan?
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, if there's anybody that's studying for the 901, my suggestion would be to switch to the 1001, because what I noticed today, I went in to volunteer at the school district, and I've been so focused on the 902 that what I'm studying is the Windows 7 and Windows 8, and everybody's transitioning to Windows 10. And so now I can't remember how to do things in Windows 10. And so you might as well do because Windows 7 is being phased out in December of this year. So most companies are going to be going to Windows 10. And so that 1000 level exam would definitely prepare you better than the 902 and 901 exam.
Right. Plus the fact that Windows 10 has been around for a couple years now, right? So a lot of us are used to it. We're using it every day, as opposed to Vista, which I'm sure. I hope no one's using Vista. If you are, good luck to you.
Yeah, there were actually a couple XP questions on the exam too.
Really?
Yeah, I was shocked. I'm like, you're kidding, right?
Yeah, well, that's another thing that I forgot to bring up when I was going through the objectives. I was talking to a student the other day. This just came up. He was saying that he just took his exam. I think it was the 902, and he was seeing stuff that wasn't in the objectives. So what I want to make sure everyone understands is that they do put in questions that have nothing to do with these objectives. So the main thing is just not to freak out. You'll be able to spot it. If you study these objectives well, you'll know when they ask you something that doesn't really pertain to what you've been studying.
They do say on the beginning of the objectives, though, that there still might be stuff that isn't listed here.
Right.
Up at the top.
Right.
And also when you go to take the exam, at the very beginning, you have to read through tons of stuff. And it tells you that there will be questions on here that really aren't graded for your exam. They're mixed in, so you're not going to be able to identify them. But there are some in there that just aren't even counted.
Right. And that was my point. So the main thing is don't freak out. Just, take your best guess and move forward. Just don't get stuck on it or let it throw you off your game. Because they do those on every exam. Every one that I've taken has had at least a couple of those, just kind of left field questions. And, the first couple of times, I kind of let it get to me, but, I got used to it after that. So, very important.
The other thing I noticed on my last two exams was that whatever average percentage I was doing on all my practice tests is kind of about the percentage that I got on the actual exam.
Okay.
So if you're scoring 85% on the practice test, you're probably going to do fine on the exam.
Okay. Which practice exams did you use primarily?
I used the Online Expert. Once I got done with everything, I went back and did those again, pre and post. I did the stuff in the back of the CompTIA, or the book they send us. What was that called? Exam Compass? No. Exam Cram. They have the disc, or you can go online and take their practice tests. I did those a couple of times. I also did Exam Cram, and they have like 20 of them online. Those were harder. They're a lot wordier.
Okay. So what I want everyone to notice is that she used multiple sources, right? She didn't key in on one and just take it over and over and over. Okay, that's a big mistake because you end up memorizing the questions. So if anything, do what she did. Once you get used to a set of questions, right? I mean, it's okay to go through them twice. You don't want to go through them more than 3 times because, you know, at that point you're just memorizing questions, and those questions won't be on the exam. I guarantee it. So, yeah, you want to keep your question pool fresh. Once you get used to one set, then you want to move on to another one. Okay? Definitely. That also helps you, you know, it helps keep you on your toes. So you're kind of ready for what's coming next because you kind of have no clue. So, all right. Let's see. What else about the 902? Okay, so software troubleshooting. All right, I think this is something that we definitely need to hit on. All right, because troubleshooting is big on not just this exam, but all of them. Okay, if you go to the 1001, you're going to see hardware troubleshooting. Right, if you go to NetPlus, it's just troubleshooting, right? And you're not going to see so much troubleshooting on SecPlus, but you're still going to see scenarios. Okay, so the main thing that I want to make sure that you understand is the security. I don't want you to get thrown off by it. It's all pretty, it's basic. Okay, they're not going into depth. You're not going to have to encrypt or decrypt, and you're not going to have to know. You're not going to have to decode anything or anything like that. This is just kind of, you can see here, right? Identify common security threats. So, you know the difference between a worm and a virus and a Trojan. Know the characteristics of a rootkit, right? Some of the signs that you have these, right? Make sure that you know those. Social engineering, this is something that's going to get bigger and wider when you get to the Security Plus exam. But for now, these are the ones that you need to key in on, okay? Just make sure you know the characteristics, right? They're not asking you to do anything outside of identify here. So same thing here, right? It's just compare and contrast. So just know what this stuff is, when you would use it, right? The application of it. That's the type of stuff that they're going to be testing on the exam, right? They're going to, and even when it doesn't say given a scenario, like most of the questions are going to be presented in the scenario form. So just be ready for that, all right? And then you can see down here, you know, there's not a lot. When I scroll down here, it's just basic stuff, right? Setting strong passwords, password expiration, right? This was another one that came up. A student was asking me the other day about a password question because they all look the same. So if you see a password question on the exam and they all look the same, look for the one that's going to be the hardest to remember. That's going to be the answer. It's going to be the one where instead of CompTIA spelled out, it's a capital C and it's a 0 instead of a O. And then it's a lowercase m, and then a capital P, and then a lowercase t, right? The one that would be hardest to remember, that's the one that you're going to be looking for, even though they all look the same. That's going to be the one that you're looking for, all right? So just keep that in mind. Right, so, you know, they're not going into AES and TKIP and private versus public keys and all that stuff, right? It's just kind of basic security stuff, so don't let it throw you off. Right, it's just your introduction, right? And then the other area, this is the area where you want to make sure that you start getting troubleshooting down now, okay? And because you're going to continue to see it. That's kind of the structure that they're going with since I was a student. That's the biggest transition that I've seen in the exams is they're going more towards troubleshooting with every update. Okay, so this is the area where you want to start getting it down even before this exam. In the 1001, you want to make sure that you get the steps down. Actually, I believe, give me a second. Yeah, we still have some time. I did have those objectives, so where did they go?
Hey, Tristan.
Yes, ma'am.
If you talk to somebody that works in IT, they spend a majority of their time doing troubleshooting.
Yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, you know, when they get past all the interviews and the certifications and the degrees and all that stuff, they really just want to be comfortable that you can solve their problems. So that's why troubleshooting is so important, and you're going to continue to see it. And I believe, okay, so hardware and network troubleshooting, right? This is the 1001 here. And I believe if I go down here, the troubleshooting steps will be here. They're right here, yep. Now, they just moved this over from the Net Plus exam. Prior to this, these steps were on the Net Plus exam. So you didn't even see these until you got to Net Plus, but now you can see that they've thrown them on the first A+ exam. So this tells you how important troubleshooting is and how often you're going to see it. You're supposed to get your foundation here, and then as you move forward, you're going to continue to see it. Just like she said, troubleshooting is probably it's the biggest part of the industry. Fixing someone's problems. When nothing's wrong, that's when everything's quiet, right? But when the phone's ringing off the hook, you got problems. And so, one thing I want you to notice is that every sub-objective under troubleshooting is given a scenario. Okay, be prepared for that. That's what they're gonna do. They're gonna create a scenario, and they're gonna put you in the middle of it, and they're gonna ask you, what's the next best step, or what's the most likely cause, or what's the solution, right? So very important. Once you learn these steps and you can put them in order, the thing that you want to be able to do is identify where you are in the process, because they don't always put you at the beginning, and that's important to know. Okay, sometimes they put you at the beginning, but sometimes they put you in the middle, and you have to figure out, okay, what do I do next? What have I already tried? Because if they put you in the middle, an easy way to catch you is if you don't know you're in the middle, they can put something, say a step or two prior to that, something that you've already tried, and that can confuse you. So it's very important to identify which step you're at, and then that'll kind of give you an idea of what you've already tried and where you go from there. Okay, so very important. Troubleshooting is something that you want to make sure that you get, because it's not going anywhere. You're going to continue to see it, right? Even past CompTIA, if you go into IC&D to Cisco, half of Cisco is troubleshooting. It's troubleshooting and verifying and configuring. That's all Cisco is. It's configure, verify, and troubleshoot. So, okay. So Brian mentioned that Ubuntu is totally worth downloading if you are interested in learning Linux, and he is absolutely correct. Okay. If you're working on this exam, it would be a good idea to get your hands on a version of that. I can give you a link that will give you a free ISO for VMware. Okay, I use VMware. If you want to use VirtualBox, they're both good. Okay, but if you're taking this exam, the main part of this, even though we're talking about troubleshooting, is going to be these operating systems, and the best way to get comfortable with them is to play around with some type of version of it, whether it be a virtual machine or that you created yourself, which I recommend doing if you haven't, just for the practice. You only need about 8 gigs of RAM to run a guest operating system. So if you have the RAM, I highly recommend downloading some VMs. It's pretty simple to enable virtualization. You just have to go into your BIOS, because it is disabled by default. So if you want to run virtual machines, you have to go into your BIOS and enable virtualization. An easy way to check if you're not sure is just open up your task manager and go to performance, go to your processor, and it'll tell you if it's enabled or not. Right, come down here, it'll let you know if virtualization is enabled or not. Okay. Well, I'm running a lot of memory right now. It's not good. So yeah, if you want to get your hands on, actually, you know what? I'll put the link in the chat box for you. So if you are interested in downloading Linux, a virtual machine, you'll be able to do that. Give me a second. We still have about about 15 minutes left. What questions do we have, if any? Kelly wants suggestions for Net Plus. Yeah, give me just a second. Oh, by the way, we're going to be having a Net Plus session tomorrow. So, not sure if you can make it or not, but it'll be tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern, same place. For VMware, okay. Just a second, I'm just going through these, making sure I didn't miss any questions. Okay. All right, give me just a second. Okay, so here's the site, and I'll put the link in the chat box for anyone who wants it. Okay, and I'm also going to show you where you can get your hands on some, looks like, okay, so you can get Win 7 and Win 8 here. Okay, most of you should be running on Win 10 right now. So the only one that you would really be missing would be Vista, unless you're taking the 1002, then you're covered, because these are all the operating systems that you're responsible for on the 1002. Okay, so for the 902, the only one that you'd be missing here is Vista. Okay, so you'd have access to Win 7 and Win 8. So I'll go ahead and put this in the chat box as well. All right, make sure you get some practice doing that, because experience makes all the difference in the world. There we go. Okay, so I put the one for Linux in there, and I also put the one so you can gain access to virtual machines here, and then just download VMware or VirtualBox. Setting up a virtual machine is pretty simple. It's not that difficult. It's really just about allocating the right amount of resources to your virtual machine, and putting it in the right place. But other than that, it's pretty simple. It's good experience, especially for the second exam. Okay, so let's see, real quick, while we're talking about virtualization, and I did mention this before, they did move virtualization over to the first exam. So this is something that you're going to be seeing, even though you're going to be dealing with your operating systems on the second exam. You're getting your introduction to virtualization and cloud computing on the first exam. Okay, so that's the main difference between the 901 and the 1001 is the addition of virtualization. They just moved it from the second exam to the first. Okay, so for those of you that are transitioning, make sure that you, even though it's only 12%, and there's not a lot here. Okay, like I said, they just moved some stuff over from the other exam. So just make sure you do your homework on this. And, you shouldn't really, this section here really shouldn't affect the outcome too much. You just want to make sure that you have it covered. Okay. And last but not least, this is something that I bring up a lot, acronyms. Make sure you know your acronyms. They're going to come up, you're going to see them, I guarantee it. There's a huge list down here, and I'm not telling you to memorize all of these, right? You're not going to be able to. But what you want to do is just identify the ones that are in the objectives of the exam that you're taking. So let's say that you're taking the 1001, right? If you don't know what these are, scroll down, put them on a flashcard, and all the information that you can find about it. And just make sure that you know your acronyms, because you're going to see a ton of them on the exam. Some of them are going to be relevant, some of them won't. If you know what they are, you'll be able to easily throw away the ones that have nothing to do with the question. But if you don't know your acronyms that well, then you're pretty much just going to be guessing. So the more acronyms that you know, the better for any of these exams. Identify the ones that you don't know and make sure that you know them. Okay. Let's see, what else do we have here? Professor Messer and Exam Compass. I highly recommend using Professor Messer as a secondary source. This should always be a secondary source. You shouldn't rely too much on one resource, because most of us, we only pull a certain percentage from each resource. So, but it's always good to be able to compare notes. So, good resource. Exam Compass, very good for testing. Let me demonstrate that real quick for the students that may watch this on the replay. Exam Compass is an excellent resource for testing your knowledge. Okay, you can see here that there is a variety of exams, of practice exams here. Okay, so the chances that you're going to memorize questions are real slim, because there's too many exams. What I really like about this resource is they have topic specific exams. So here you're just kind of going through the objectives as a whole. Here you just key in on one or two, right? Printers, connectors and cabling devices, display devices. And this is really good for when you're just trying to touch up on those weak areas, okay? Keep in mind up here, this is the 901. They do have the 1001 resources down here. You just have to scroll below the 902, okay? So the 902 stuff is going to be here, same thing, right? About 20 different exams, and then you have your topic-specific ones. And then for those of you that are moving to the 1001, this is your section here, okay? So there's actually a couple more exams here. And then you have quite a bit more topic-specific exams as well, right? So this is a really good resource. Not to mention your virtualization and cloud computing quiz, right? So you want to make sure, if you're taking the 1001, you want to make sure that you do well on these two in this area right here before you go and take the exam, okay? Because this is the main thing that's missing from the 901 training. All right, it's actually in the 902 training. But if you can go through these, like Kelly said, if you're noticing high percentages and you're keeping your question pool fresh, then you're doing pretty well. Okay, if you're taking an exam 3 or 4 times and you're getting 100%, well, you probably should be if they're not changing the questions around. So just keep that in mind. All right. Really good resource. Glad you brought that up, Matthew. Okay, where are we at? Got about 5 minutes left. Any other questions pertaining to the 902, 1001, 901? Hopefully no one's going in for the 901 anymore, unless you've already scheduled it. But at this point, I would probably avoid the 900 series exam unless you're already locked into it. Okay. All right. Well, this was a great session. Focus was A+. Tomorrow's session, we'll focus on Net Plus. So the primary, that will be the primary focus, but it's more networking as a whole. If you're one of the students that are working on IC&D and you have some questions about that, I'll be glad to answer those as well, because they kind of tie in anyway. Net Plus is kind of basic networking, and IC&D is a little bit intermediate, more advanced. But yeah, you know, for the most part, networking is what we'll be discussing tomorrow. Okay. Dan has a question. Will Fridays ever be a? Right now, I don't know. Fridays have always been reserved for Net Plus because it's a session. It was an extra session that we added a couple years ago just to address Net Plus. So the Friday sessions have always been Net Plus, but we are in a transition with these sessions. So we're still trying to figure out the best way to do them and the best way to structure it. So it is a possibility that we could do A Plus on Fridays. It just kind of depends on what we come up with and how we decide to alter the current schedule. Okay, let me start getting the names down. Are there any other questions? No problem at all, Kelly. And congrats again on your cert. That's a really big accomplishment. You should make sure that you go out and you celebrate that. Always a great thing to get a cert right before the weekend. It's always the best time to get them. But, you know, win, lose, or draw, you know, it's always good to kind of take a break and after an exam, let your mind decompress and things like that before you go back in. So anyway, congrats. And also congrats to Brian on his success. And if anyone else has any other questions, now's the time. I'm getting the names down, and then, you know, we'll be cutting loose from there.